Intersection,
Intersection Magazine Podcast.
Welcome to Intersection Magazine Podcast. My guest today is Doris Acheng Odit. She has been a guest here before. She is an extensive writer, a consultant, a person in finance. She has quite a number of things that she does. But today we really wanted to do something different. We normally meet and had scheduled some conversations about the investment space and identifying what different individuals or different companies are actually doing. But before we even got into the conversation, we ended up having a discussion that's worthy of a podcast itself. So this happens quite often when I meet with Miss Doris Acheng Odit. And so what I think we're going to do today is we're going to have her actually help direct the conversation because she has an amazing summary of what we actually talked about. So once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. And I'm your host, Nicholas Kianda. So Doris, take us through our Friday conversation. What did we talk about and what will the users benefit from this morning?
Yeah, thanks, Nicholas. So I guess on Friday when you came to record the podcast, we ended up a bit of on a tangent, a bender of a discussion, which was on polymaths and how they navigate the world. And I'd say for polymaths, then we also throw in autodidacts. Because a polymath is a person who plays across the board on so many subjects and on so many areas. And then an autodidact is someone who can teach themselves so many things across their life. So we also talked about adaptive intelligence. So right now we're living in a world where the terrain is, it's fluid, it's always shifting. And yet in the past, we were taught process flows on do step 1, do step 2, do step 3 on whatever we're doing. And yet the world now demands that people be adaptive, even in small things like how you handle meetings, professional meetings. On AI limits, particularly for autodidacts who are now trying to learn through AI. And then I think we ended the conversation with something a bit more personal, where there's intersection both in your own pursuits as well as my own pursuits, which is legacy. Building on our parents' legacy, but also the fact or the discussion over where does the parents' legacy end and where does one's legacy start. I think it's talked about. So that is more or less a summary. Then I think we'll go through some of the questions or some of the conversations that we were having. So Nicholas, I guess, and maybe you can repeat. Last Friday, what I asked you was, what does Nicholas do?
I remember I struggled so much to give you the answer to that question because I try to cover quite a number of fields. My response was that I'm a podcaster. I also have a magazine I publish, and that my training was actually in ministry in the US, in Christian ministry, as well as computer networks. When I got back from the US to Uganda, when I came to Uganda, because that was my first time here. And your response was interesting because you asked me really about you questioned the identity of the passion project, or like was that really what was I describing? Maybe you can highlight a little bit more, help me understand the depth of the question.
And the reason why I asked you is, as I mentioned, I've been meeting a lot of people of recent and asking them, what is it that you do? And then usually when there are polymaths or there are people who have many hats in many places, they'll take a minute. You literally see the person thinking of an answer to you. And I think that was also the sense that I got from you. So for instance, when I asked you, what do you do? You paused for a minute to think, which usually someone who has had a linear career path where they've, say it's a lawyer, they've been lawyering their entire lives. If you ask them, what is it that you do? Give you an answer right away. So usually and I could relate to it because I myself have been asked the same question by many people often. So I'll meet someone and they'll ask me, but Doris, what is it that you do exactly? Because sometimes I'll hear you talk of things that make you sound like you're an economist. Sometimes you talk of things that make you sound like you're a lawyer or etc. So what is it exactly that you do? Which also for me is usually a hard question to answer, even within the consulting domain. But then with, that being what you call a jack of all trades, it comes with challenges, and maybe I'll share some of them. Then maybe you can also share what you've seen that resonates also from your perspective as someone who wears many hats. So for people who have had non-linear career paths, most of them are polymathic, most of them are people who can teach themselves. The challenge will always be that it's very hard to compete in a world that rewards linearity. So I gave an example, for instance, a generalist consultant. I've worked, if you look at my CV, it's 20-something pages long. There are projects on aviation, there are projects on mining, there are projects on finance, there are projects on inclusion, which makes me very qualified for a consulting role. But say there's also projects on private equity, for instance. So let's take the example of private equity. So were my CV competing with another person for a private equity industry job, despite all the diverse ranges of experiences that I have, I would not qualify for the job, because the world is judging through competence, through have you been at one thing for this many years and stuck to it, and have you grown through the ranks? Whereas, someone like me may bring more diverse perspectives. So it's very hard to compete as a polymath in a linear world. The other challenge that I see is it's like you're always starting from scratch, because the trend with people who wear many hats is they never stay in an industry or in a niche for too long. Maybe after 2 years, they'll switch to another, not a career, maybe another subject area or another interest, or pursue another passion, which means you're always starting from scratch. So it's not like, let's say, for instance, where if you were pursuing a linear career, you'd, climb all the way to C. With this, you're always starting from scratch, and it means you're always having to reprove yourself. So it's like, 4 steps up, 5 steps down, all the time, which has also implications, also stability in terms of track record consistently within one area, as well as also financial stability. The other thing is polymaths are, you'd say they're driven by their curiosity. So for instance, with you, Nicholas, I think your interest is primarily in startups and in the investment space. So there's that curiosity that drives polymaths to acquire new knowledge and learn how an industry works, or learn how X works, and they'll typically teach themselves. So they'll not go to a university or through an apprenticeship to learn XYZ skills. And the challenge with that, because it's so easy for them to learn, there's a tendency towards, okay, once you've reached mastery through self-teaching, there's a tendency to undercharge for your services. Because it comes so easy to you, and you did not really invest money per se in going through a university, getting certificate, etc., that you feel, okay, maybe this is not worth 1,000 a day. So there's that as well. But happy to hear your perspective on those points.
Yes, I was thinking about maybe an intervention for people like me who find themselves in this kind of space. I found that I kind of enjoy, or I benefit a lot from mentoring other people, although I haven't got too much into that space as much as I'd like to. So I think it will kind of hit a little bit into the subject of legacy that we talked about before, or that we'll be talking about later. Like, if you have so many other people in specific categories that you're helping learn something, maybe because I have my interest in art, I have interest in baking, I have interest in web design and all those kinds of things. So it helps me if I have other people that I'm teaching or training or mentoring in those areas. So there's almost like there's going to be like a downward flow from me learning from whatever source I've chosen to learn from, and then doing some kind of lateral interaction with people that are quote unquote on the same level with me, and then downwardly looking down and saying, okay, who can I teach what I do? In fact, when I started Hope First Enterprises, or Hope First Group, it was Hope First Group before, I split it up into what I believed back in the day to be called segmentation, or so segments. I think I learned that from an author called Martin Bell. I was going through his book, his workbook on business, on management, and so he talked about segmentation, and talked about how you split up your business into different areas that are more closely related to one subject. And so I had, for example, I had the Hope First group, and then I had underneath that I had the Hope First media, so that was dealing mainly with the web design and the web hosting. Then I had the Hope First publishers, and this came a little bit later, where I was now dealing with uh, anything related to publishing, including now the magazine. The magazine came in 2011, although Hope First Group was birthed in 2005, so it's coming up to 20 years old. Then I had the Hope First training, and with training, all I wanted to do was to teach people what I did. You know, like if I'm good enough at web designing, if I'm good enough at the basics of web hosting, somebody else should be learning what I'm doing at a reasonable cost.
Yeah.
Then I also had a spin-off of what I called Hope First Finance, where I wanted to be able to save my money without necessarily using a bank. So I thought, why don't I give this money out to really, really small checks? Why don't I give this money out to people who want it for immediate needs, and then, you know, expect it to be returned in periods of maybe like a year or less than a year with no interest. So I'd be saving my money, but I'd also be investing in somebody else. So that's why I created, you know, in a sense, segments of my business.
Yeah.
But also helped myself to not to feel like I'm an island in a sense, but that I was giving back to the community. In terms of challenges of being a polymath and feeling like you're an island, I think it helps when you create some inlets or some connections to the main shore.
Tributaries to the
yeah.
And then maybe to ask you what your experience is. Do you ever get to a point where you feel, okay, so my interest was X, Y, Z. I've studied all that I could study, or learned all that I could learn on X, Y, Z, either through self-teaching or through mentorship. And I've reached a point of saturation. I think I'm now bored. I want to do something else now.
To be honest, what normally happens is when you because the segments allow me also to track the financial progress of many of my projects. Sometimes it's driven purely by finance. If I see that one section is not functioning, if it's not producing, then I jump to the other one that has immediate financial gain. Because just like we said, we need to keep the lights on. There are things, bills that have to be paid. So, you know, for example, the web design and web hosting thing it brings in money, let's say yearly. Unless it's, of course, I'm maintaining websites and putting up updates, then I expect some kind of payment monthly to make those updates happen. Now, in terms of the bakery or the cakes, those can bring in money every week, maybe. You know, and then now there's been a spin-off to where I teach people how to do what I do in terms of the baking. So there's a possibility that could expand as well. So in terms of driving or deciding what to do on points of saturation, it's like my attention, when it goes to something else, it's usually because that something else at that point in time can fulfill some of my immediate financial needs.
Yeah. And I think this is the challenge that we have as people who are driven by curiosity in terms of, you know, what we are pursuing. Is sometimes the curiosity, like the new thing that has hooked you into, this is what I want to learn. It's like you're going down a rabbit hole. The latest thing can be so all-consuming, but might not be what will earn you money. So how are you balancing that? I think that is the tricky part for people who have who are always teaching themselves new things and who are polymaths, is how do you not let this rabbit hole that is not bringing you money take over your life, such that you cannot pay electricity bills, you cannot run your life, etc. How do you balance you chasing an area of curiosity, what you call purpose? Because a lot of the things that polymaths chase are actually vision driven. So there are things that they think, okay, maybe I have foresight, this will be something in the next 5 years, but you need to still live now, today. You need to pay your bills today. So I think it's how much time are you spending on that rabbit hole vis-a-vis how much time are you spending on the boring things that actually are needed to keep your life going is where the tricky balance usually comes in. So balancing that purpose and profit, curiosity and bills have to be paid. I think is a key challenge. Like for me, for instance, when you first interviewed me in a podcast, which was last year, I was very, I'd say there's quite a bit of idealism as a new entrepreneur, which I think is what social entrepreneurs usually come across, face reality. Is those when you ask me what is your farm about, there's a lot of idealism on it is purpose led, I'm focusing on the sectors that will drive the future. I'm focusing on renewable energy, I'm focusing on EVs, I'm focusing on critical minerals. So we're looking at that as having a return window of the next 5 years. But then as you're looking at the future, reality also hits you and you're saying, okay, maybe your focus on AI won't pay your bills right now. It might in the next 3 years, but maybe not now. So it's the question of how do you balance your pursuits as someone who's always, trying to learn new areas and pursue new visions, so to speak, with bills have to be. Maybe you have more experience with that because you've been playing the game for a while.
What I normally do for that is, and I think we also kind of dealt with this briefly when we talked about creatives, is that your energy, your drive is driven by the things that you're emotionally attached to. So there are things that you feel so deeply about that you'll need to keep going. That will keep you going regardless of how much money you're making. So that's your fuel. You have to keep that in the back burner somewhere and do the boring stuff for boring stuff's sake, for the money's sake. So because we're generally passion driven people, you have to keep thinking about and pursuing the things that you like, even if they're not bringing you money, because eventually it's like an incubation period. Eventually the time will come when it will. Now the other challenge that creative people normally have, that I've seen this also, is because we are more than we're feelers more than we are thinkers, and we're thinkers as well, but because we tend to feel more, you mentioned this also, that there's a fear of charging too much for what we're providing, because we feel like we're fighting against ourselves. So for that, you need a connection with someone who does the math, who's an expert on the finances, to just basically tell you what you're doing is worthwhile, and you should charge this much. We need to connect with people who are familiar with the financial angle. So my suggestion is, have the passion project close by, because it will keep you going, because it's your fuel. Creative people don't function primarily on money, and they need to be reminded. They need to be to understand the importance of getting the money to paying the bills as well, because they'll gladly live off the street while pursuing their passion, but that's not feasible. You can't meet your clients off the street. So that's what my suggestion is. You have to keep your passion project close, because it's your lifeline. It's your it's the thing that's keeping you alive right now. But then, of course, you need to connect, hopefully, with people who are more finance driven, because they'll help you direct your attention to the boring businesses, which incidentally, if you look at it carefully, the boring businesses are actually making a lot more money than the ones that
They
everybody's
make a lot of
pursuing.
money. Boring is profitable.
Yeah, yeah,
Because the boring businesses are grounded in the realities of the now.
yes, they are.
Yeah. So for instance, and forgive me if I'm not calling it a passion project, like for your baking business, people need to eat now.
That's true.
Whereas for, say, your magazine, I think for me, the question then, and there are people who have managed to merge their passions with money making. It's how do you have your passion and still make money from it, which you have even with your magazine. It's a paid for subscription magazine. And as you said, the challenge also is, and I'll now jump away from the polymathic angle into, if you have foresight and you're looking more into the future, it's like you're living there. You tend to think that you owe the world 3 things.
That's true. That's very true.
So how I think the challenge, and it applies to creatives, it applies to polymaths, it applies to who are visionaries, is how do you say, okay, profit must come before purpose. For me to be able to do the Intersection magazine, go to, get on a board or get on a car and go to interview someone, I actually need to have that money. So therefore, profit should precede purpose. Is I think where a lot of creatives, a lot of polymaths, and a lot of visionaries struggle. I don't know what your perspective is on that.
Okay, just like I said before, the thing that I can do that makes me the quickest buck usually helps finance the passion project. So, for example, like the bakery that I mentioned, because it brings money weekly or even daily, depending on who I'm supplying, I can use that to finance the long-term podcast project or the long-term magazine project. The magazine project will bring money. The podcast will bring money, yes, but I'm also investing in relationships and networks through the podcast. At some point, I'm going to be able to walk up to the person on the podcast and say, I need some financing. And hopefully they'll be more than ready to oblige. So because you have a segmentation and you have a prioritization in terms of what's bringing money and what's not, and what's passion and what's purpose, what's profit, what's purpose, then you can direct your money based on that understanding. So like I was saying, the challenge is for me to be able to split my businesses up like I said at the beginning, where you segment it, and then the one that you can do regardless of your circumstances, which is a boring one, which also incidentally happens to bring you a little bit more cash, can help finance the long-term one.
Yeah.
Because the long-term one, you have usually the polymath, the creative is also most likely a visionary. Also, he's not a thermometer; he's a thermostat. He sees stuff coming. He prepares for it. He goes through the struggle of having to communicate it to people who don't believe him until 5-6 years down the road. So he has to sustain what he's doing, and he can only sustain what he's doing by doing the boring stuff, which brings in the little cash here and there, and then eventually helps get him where he needs to get to.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that you've talked about, there's one thing that you mentioned that has caught my attention, which is the, visionaries, polymaths, maybe, I don't know about creatives, but let's say visionaries, polymaths. They're pattern, what you call them, they have patterning minds. They can see patterns, and therefore they have foresight. And you're here talking about, this thing that has not yet trended, and people are looking at you like you're a crazy person. So the question for anyone who has a patterning mind and has that foresight potential is, should you, be in the business of saying, actually, this is going to be trending in the next three years, or quietly sit down and build your own competitive moat and say, I will quietly wait for this to trend. I don't need to tell anyone else. Is there a responsibility towards saying, okay, if I've seen this is what is coming ahead in terms of opportunity, but then I need to tell everyone, but vis-a-vis, if I've seen this is what is coming ahead, let me quietly build competitive advantage in this area. So where is
the good thing with telling people is, part of it is how like you gauge credibility. If you say something and then 5 years later on people realize you were right. So there's that part. There's almost a responsibility to say something, but it's not something you should be forced to do. I think also, if you think about the game of cards, how you have to keep your cards close to your chest. That's kind of a little bit the same thing, in the sense that, especially if it's going to be profit making, your investment portfolio is your investment portfolio, and that's a bit of what you're doing, because you can predict something is going to be successful in the future. You're not the thermometer, you're the thermostat. You're setting the pace. So people actually should pay to get access to your thoughts. You can give them a tidbit at the beginning, let them know this is what I'm thinking, and then if they're smart enough to look at what you said before, then they'll realize that this guy has something he's offering. To get them into that space in which you're operating, that's a privilege. That's something that
and I think
they have to pay for.
It ties to the discussion we had on charging, on pricing for skills, pricing for foresight, pricing for knowledge that comes easily to you, that sometimes you forget other people should pay for.
Mm.
Because I think that ties into that. And then the other aspect before we jump into the other areas that we discussed on Friday is, there are people who have they also have foresight, but they also have their foresight is more for identifying talented individuals who are underused. And actually, this is actually the whole game of investing. You identify an asset that is underpriced, invest in it at a small amount, and then get outsized returns. So there are also people who are like that for either polymaths or creatives or visionaries. And they'll invest in them. So the investment can be varied. It can be they'll hire them. It can be they'll actually invest, like for startups. They'll invest actual money in them, or etc. So I think the other question is particularly for people who are visionary or who are etc. or who have skills that are not readily found, is how do you protect yourself in terms of saying, is this a partnership or is it an extractive dynamic?
Partnerships are complex because they might involve a split that will not be comfortable, even in the finance space, or the investment space. The whole idea of dilution. How much of what you have to offer is going to be wasted away every time you get someone coming in to become a partner with you. What is their contribution? How do you monetize your intellectual knowledge? How do you monetize your foresight? So you have to be careful when you're doing that, because things always get tricky the bigger the chunks of cash there come at the end of the investment. You're investing, you've seen something that nobody else has seen, or you've seen someone that nobody else has seen. Will they appreciate your input? Because it's not just seeing the person, it's also being able to draw out the good stuff that they need to draw out to become who they need to become. If you think of yourself as a talent coach, or someone who's recruiting talent or searching for talent, will you ever even be recognized for the work that you've done?
Yeah.
So I think you have to go easy on the partnerships.
Yeah, and also I think a lot of pre-partnership documentation and structuring is needed. Ambiguity is visionaries and creatives' worst enemy when it comes to partnerships. It's better to have at least things explicit and documented even before the partnership starts. Now, on the other subject that we discussed as pertains to polymaths, so we talked about the world basically rewards linearity. So, someone who has started from, if it's a lawyer, you've started from the beginning, you've climbed up the ranks, and that's all you've done. You'll get rewarded. If you're a consultant and you've specialized in one sector, specialized maybe in one domain, let's say tax, consulting, that's where we started, that's where you've grown, you get rewarded. But then that was assumed that worked in a world that was linear. Things changed at a slow pace. The context changed at a slow pace. And that's the context that punished non-linearity, which polymaths are today. They're in this, tomorrow they're in something else. Was a slow changing context. So right now the context has changed. Things are changing very fast. So for instance, the people who are talking about AI in January 2025, we're now in October 2025. They're talking about AI is going to come and it's going to disrupt, say, industry X, particularly consulting, if we give an example. And people are laughing. They're like, it won't change that fast. People are laughing at these insights. They're like, it won't change that fast. It's mid 2025 as a projected, timeline in which, consultants start losing jobs to AI is not a reasonable timeline. And now in October, I guess that has changed. So the consultants that stuck to this is it perception of the world will remain the same. The world changes slowly. AI will disrupt jobs in consulting, but it won't disrupt jobs in consulting in 2025. This might probably happen in 2027. I still have time. Are now finding themselves in a predicament. Whereas the ones that had foresight and said, you know what, when change comes, it's better to ride with it. Let me teach myself new skills, are now in a better positioning, or even not let me teach myself new skills. If strategy consulting is changing, what other type of consulting can I jump into? Say like implementation, that is boots on the ground, man on the ground. There's no AI that's going to go to a farm in Karamoja, to analyze the situation there. So that adaptive muscle is working. So I think the discussion we're having was a lot of the world, even education, was based on the premise that things are linear. For you to do this, you should do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, which doesn't work now. So which gives an upper hand to these polymaths who are always learning new things and adaptive and etc. Somehow they have now, what should I say, an advantage over the non-linear, and it also works to, I think. Also I think you are also giving an example of someone who's teaching sales and they're saying do X, Y, Z, don't deviate from this script. But even in things as easy as professional meetings, you have to go with you have to be able to read the room these days and be adaptive, even within that micro context, which now can be projected to the whole. So everyone should try to be a polymath, I think. But happy to hear but not everyone has that ability also, because there's also that misconception that people can learn fast and teach themselves and pivot from X to Y, Z. Sometimes also assume everyone can do that. So there's also a lack of empathy. I think this is where we should talk about the bad aspects of polymaths. Sometimes they lack empathy, not understanding. Not everyone can teach themselves something and then jump into it and then start earning money from it tomorrow.
That's true.
Yeah, but happy to hear your thoughts.
From my perspective, you're right in saying that there's been a need to adapt. And it's interesting you're saying all of this because I can see also a match of ideas between what's going on the personal level with what's going on with companies. If you think about the company as an organization and what it has had to struggle with in terms of how does it grow, do you become all things to all men? If you look at most of the giants, they have had to say, okay, LinkedIn has become successful. Let's get LinkedIn on board. This email platform has become successful. Let's get that also. So they're now thinking in terms of creating ecosystems around themselves by which they can meet more needs and be a little bit more successful. So we can do that as well. The person who does not necessarily have the ability to think or to become a polymath can connect with other people that are in other sectors. We can use the advantage you have had in an organization for so long to network with other people that may be more competent or may have skills that you don't have and create and form partnerships. I knew, for example, of a lady who I believe she wasn't even a teacher. All she was good at is connecting people. So what she would do is she would teachers or professionals that were competent in certain areas, and she created a platform whereby they could all come together and teach professionally in workshop settings and conference settings. And she'd be the person in the background just connecting all of them together. So she was not necessarily a trainer, but she was a networker. She just knew how to pull people together. So we can do that as well. People who are not polymaths can do that as well. You can take
leverage
advantage
on
of other people's.
Yeah. So network more.
Definitely.
Don't stay in your office or your house and.
No.
Then I think for the other aspect that we had a discussion on was your latest interest area, which is venture capital, angel investing, and how you are trying to learn, self-teach, and how you tried to leverage AI towards that self-teaching and how that worked out. And let's hear from you before I jump in with my opinions.
Okay. So what I was trying to do is let me not even name the group that I was mentioning. I was talking about I applied for a certain group to be part of their venture capital internship or different roles in the organization. They put out an offer. So it had like 6 stages, 6 really hard stages to go through. So I went all through all the 5 stages except the last one, where the question was, one of the questions they asked was, what's your investment thesis? And I've been asked that question before in a different setting, actually when I was in Tanzania. and Zanzibar. I was asked that question, and my answer was really simple. For me, it's a scratch my back and I scratch yours kind of thing. But now, of course, you can't answer that kind of question that way if you're in a professional setting. It needed a little bit more expansion. But I think what I felt primarily was a bit of disappointment or a bit of sadness, in the sense that if you're going to learn or if you're going to intern on a certain subject, there should be about a limit in the sense of what you're expected to know if you're really going to be an intern. So I felt like they were asking a bit too much at that level. Anyhow, so with a touch of disappointment, I moved on as quickly as I could and went to one of my favorite AI tools, and I said, okay, help me create a comprehensive course for venture capital investment. And I think even in our conversation you mentioned this, that the importance of knowing how to ask questions. We've been doing that with Google for such a long time, but few people know the type of questions to ask. I asked it for a comprehensive course. It gave me the course. It gave me options for slides that I should or would have to offer. And then what I did is I went through each of the sections that it deemed important for venture capital investment, and I found a tool. I found I think they used to call them FOOCs, free and open courses or something like that, FOOCs. And so this one was offering beginner, intermediate, and advanced stage courses for different subjects. Of course, I was interested in finance and investing, so I went through the beginning where I said, okay, find me the best course on beginner's guides to venture capital, which will probably include maybe a little bit of history, definition of terms, and things of that nature. So I wanted to do that for all the 12 sections that the AI tool deemed as important for those who are going to be getting into the investment space. So I've successfully done about 3 sections. I've got a certificate for one. Of course, I'm pursuing the certificates for the rest of them, but I also want to be able to summarize what's expected of me in each of those courses so that I can confidently say that I know how to do this, I know how to do that, I know how to define these terms. I'm practical enough on those stages. So that's basically what I did and what I'm pursuing right now.
Yeah, and I think the discussion we had was one of the things that we discussed was the limits of AI on structurally opaque, particularly for people who are trying to self-teach, or what we call autodidacts, people who are trying to teach themselves things through AI. Same as maybe previously we've been, people teach themselves things, have been doing it through self-reading, or like literal literature has been written on a subject, and then through, like, for programmers, YouTube, etc., or for DIY. It's also trying to understand the limits of trying to teach yourself something through AI, as well as how to use AI. So for industries, and I'll say this from a perspective of having been in consulting since 2012, at some point within that duration, trying to search, because as we say, the problem with people who teach themselves things, or who are taught through apprenticeship, as I was, is that sometimes it's hard to prove that you know what you know. So there's always that want to go and get a few credentials. So like for consulting, there are very few. I guess maybe there is, but there are very few courses where you'll say, I don't know, masters in consulting. It's an apprenticeship trade. Then I'd say private equity is even more opaque. It's also I'd say an apprenticeship, and you learn when you get in. Which means that the way AI was modeled is it's a large language model. So it scrapes from public sources on the internet, so all the Google, etc. And so the thing is, if for an opaque industry where it has very limited information to scrape for its LLM, unless these days everyone is contributing to the large language model. They don't know, but they are.
They don't know, yeah.
So it was based on the baseline data that it had, or it learned from, the current models learned from. There's very little information on industries such as opaque industries such as private equity, or apprenticeship trades such as consulting. So for instance, you're not going to go to AI and say, I'm developing a strategy for XYZ, please develop for me the strategy. It will, but whoever is receiving that will have a lot of questions. So in these industries which are apprenticeship based or very insider and opaque, such as private equity, it's very hard to use AI to learn the trade. And if you're also getting information from AI on it without you doing the verification, you should also question it, at least for now. Once everyone contributes to the large brain, maybe in 2 years. Yeah. So for those, then maybe it's better to actually get in-person training for, even if you're not training, apprenticeship or mentorship, even if you are an autodidact. And then there are also for the venture capital industry as well, there are some, I'd say, players that focus on market intelligence. The market intelligence is also very heavily gated.
Okay.
And also now a lot of these gated sites have, policies on how much AI can scrape from whatever is gated behind the paywall. So they're just looking at a few of those. Like there's one I've been subscribed for, it's 2,000, but others can go up to 25,000 a month. So just investing in those. And then another strategy that I use, because as myself, whatever it is that I know on private venture capital is 100% self-taught. So another thing that I use, which is now zero cost to me, is and it started so it's a bit like the brain is an LLM itself, it's like a large language model itself. So you look for I not call them influencers, but there are a few pages and voices on LinkedIn that are actually, they are committed to, maybe they also have this purpose drive in them, where they say, I know, but maybe I should share what I know freely. So there are some, I don't want to call them content creators, because that would mean everyone in LinkedIn who's posting is a content creator. But there are some pages where particularly you look for journalists who report in who are analysts in private equity magazines, and then follow those. So for someone who doesn't want to spend too much on learning, just following specific pages of people, they give you early insights, etc. And many of them, because you don't want to hear from one person, each one gives you a perspective. So your brain becomes like an AI. It starts learning from here. It starts scraping.
That's what I was thinking. That once you get access to one of these systems that's behind the paywall, you can think like an AI system yourself and just start absorbing for as long as you have the subscription.
Yeah, even on LinkedIn, just following the right pages, you can get surprised. That's where I get my insights from. Just, in the morning, scrolling through my LinkedIn, I have curated my page. So I said, I'm following the right people. That's where I get my insights. And then also there's the aspect of how people are using AI right now. So a lot of people are using AI like Google. So they go in and say, create a strategy for me. But the approach is supposed to be like an architect interfacing with builders. So an architect does not tell the builder, design the building for me. Ultimately, you cannot outsource your thinking. You have to still think. And a lot of people are leaning towards the outsourcing. They are leaning towards being the architects that are telling the builder, architect for me. So it's just my 2 cents on that. But happy to hear your thoughts.
No, I agree 100%. And I think we've actually handled two of the questions that we were supposed to deal with: the opaqueness and the access, and then of course the large language models. So there's definitely going to be a revision in the way I approach the subject. I have tried to engage with some of the people that I think are important in the space, especially with the venture capital space. Fortunately, at least for the podcast, I keep getting sent requests for interviews from people who have either written books or who are seeking to feature on the podcast of where they talk about their experiences in the space.
Yeah, and yeah. And also, maybe not to interrupt, but also there is, in apprenticeship or opaque industries, you will find books But the books are more storytelling than they are, this is the process. So also just something for any person that's looking to self-teach to note. There's a lot of of these industries that I'll pick, consulting being one of them, is even with the books, there'll be more stories, like, when I was investing, these are the learnings, but it's not process. For instance, if you not understand the psychology of or the specifics of what steps, okay, we talked about dogma and the step, but the steps are still needed. Like how did you do it? Right? Don't tell me the story, tell me the gears. So a lot of what is out there is story, not gears, which is understandable. Because also me as a consultant, I'll not give you my gears. I'll tell you this. I'll show you the output. I'll not tell you how I think through things. So yeah, something to think about for who are learning, and particularly in industries that apprenticeship based learning based. But I found one book. Okay, does not show the gears. There's this one that I've been trying to finish, although I didn't finish it. It's called The Holy Grail of Investing. It was an interesting one, which I'm yet to finish. But also, I think, again, a lot of the whatever books are out there on that space are, yes, story based, and also written under the assumption that the reader already has a baseline understanding. If it's like if a medical book and it's talking about arteries and it's talking about what, and you're trying to learn medicine by yourself, it is assuming you understand those basics. Yeah,
That's true.
And then I think for the last one, we talk about passion projects. So the passion projects for people who try to, I think, build careers based on whatever it is they want to do, rather than whatever it is that will earn them money. It's always driven by passion. And the passion can be anything. The passion can be, I woke up, I got a brilliant idea. Oh, this is interesting. Let me chase it. Others, it's, I didn't necessarily get an interesting idea, but, I'm trying to follow through on a legacy. I'm trying to follow through on someone's legacy. I think there's something that I can add to that legacy or to that name. And usually legacy-driven passion is usually from parents. And I think you had something to say about people who are trying to build on legacies, particularly those that had what you call prolific parents. Maybe you can share more about that.
There's a tendency when you've had a personality or a parent with a larger than life personality or life, just to feel like you're having to walk under the shadow of that experience all your life. And then also I think it's interesting to note that there are certain people who have gotten leadership positions very early in their lives, very prominent leadership positions in their lives when they're still in their learning and earning years. And then, everything after that is almost pales in comparison to what they've had at the beginning. And so there's going to be a struggle between those two experiences. And I think it's the same thing that you face when you're dealing with a parent that was very successful or that was outstanding in his own way. How to live your life after that? Do you continue building on what is already built? Because it's like finding an incomplete house and feeling like, do I leave the house incomplete or do I finish the house? And then at what stage do I jump on building my own house?
Yeah.
And I think in some sense it's because the name has already been built, you almost have no choice but to keep building based on that name. And then of course I think you can help me answer the question in terms of investment when it comes to family offices where investment is based on
legacy.
Can you shed a little bit more light on family offices and on what?
I'm not an investor, I'm a consultant. But yeah, I get your I relate to your point on legacy and the fact that maybe you're seeing a house that someone started, metaphorically, and you're looking at it and you feel an obligation to complete it. So there are two questions there that come about clearly for people who are pursuing legacy in their own way, whether it is family offices, whether it is through their practices, consulting, whatever. I think for there are two questions. So do you so the house has not, maybe it has reached rim beam or something. That is metaphorically, that is the legacy where, say, a parent left it. And now you're saying I want to extend this name, I want to extend this legacy. Is it okay? So I've finished this house, I have roofed it. Yes, that is legacy actualized. But maybe now the next step is building on that legacy and then adding my own spice to it.
That definitely makes sense.
But yeah, but then I think the question then becomes, is it I actualize and then I add spice, or is it a perpetual building of that original house? Your views?
Usually the hope is that you get as far as you can and imbue that same sense of continuity into your new generation or the people that you brought up under you. Another question, of course, that arises from that is, do they actually have to be family that just completely captures the essence of the father's original vision?
Yeah.
Those are succession issues, continuity issues, I suppose.
And then it also means some of it also ties to mentorship. Beyond saying I should only mentor a family member in this trade, it ties to that as well. Yeah. So Nicholas, now it's you to close your podcast.
Thanks. Thank you so much for taking the role of playing it perfectly. As always, very great connecting with you. To give the listeners a summary, we started off on polymaths, identity, focus. Then we went on to purpose and profit. We talked about adaptive muscle versus static dogma. These are all summaries, by the way, created by Doris, Acheng, Odit of Odit Frontiers. Then we went on to opaqueness and access. Then we handled large language models, AI, and the architecture of thinking. And then the subject of legacy and continuity. So if you want to find out a little bit more about what she's working on, what she's doing right now, you can access her on her LinkedIn, Doris Acheng Odit, as well as on her website. You'll find the website when you get her LinkedIn page, and you can find out a lot more about her consulting work and her massive experience in the finance world as well. You can find me, of course, on my LinkedIn as well, Nicholas Kianda. So I'm going to be working on a website pretty soon, but what we have right now is the Dragon Crane website, where we mainly do sourcing of products made in China, as well as connections with legitimate manufacturers and business people that you can work with if you're looking for products in China. I'm doing that with my brother Hezekiah, who's here for a short while. He'll be returning to China shortly. So that's basically what I do and what we both do. So once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. I've been your host. I hope to see you soon.
Intersection. Intersection Magazine Podcast.